Hello everyone, I'm Kerrigan Hutton, a student here at Fort Hays State University and a member of the Tiger Media Network staff. I am proud to be serving as a moderator for today's President's Roundtable featuring FHSU President Tisa Mason, North Central Kansas Technical College President Eric Burks, and Northwest Kansas Technical College President Ben Schears. As most of you know by now, FHSU, NCK Tech, and Northwest Tech recently entered into a strategic affiliation initiative agreement to help all three higher education institutions address the demographic and economic changes in rural Kansas. Excitement on all campuses has grown since the announcement in January, but with it also coming with some questions from students. We are here today to let these three leaders each schools talk about this plan. But before we jump into questions, let's meet the three presidents who have joined us today, starting with FHSU President Tisa Mason.
Hey, Kerrigan, thank you so much for having us here today. And I am Tisa Mason, President of Fort Hays State University.
Thank you again, Kerrigan. It's nice to meet you and glad to talk with the students. My name is Eric Burks. I'm the president of North Central Kansas Technical College. We have campuses in Beloit and here in Hays.
And I'm Ben Schears, president of Northwest Tech, located in Goodland, Kansas, and also appreciate the opportunity to talk today.
Well, thank you guys. It's really nice to meet you today. And it's really great of you joining us today. I have some questions for you. First off, President Mason, can you describe what this affiliation agreement is and how it will benefit these three institutions?
Yes, and we are so excited about this because we are coming together collectively to be stronger, to serve our students, our communities, and our businesses even better. And we do that by working together across our institutions so that students will have more opportunities for more credentials, for stackable credentials, for certificates, for professional development, for on-hands learning, all those great things that all of our institutions do very well. But once we bring it together with our faculty as well, we'll have more talent working harder for the students. And for the businesses, we really are wanting to continue to explode as definitely my colleagues model the way, and apprenticeships and internships and micro-internships so that our students are getting on that hands-on learning in the real environments, and then hopefully through really great placements, they will stay in rural communities, because we're really worried that the studies of demographics are indicating that people are migrating east. And we want our community to stay strong. And together, I think as we work together and create new models of engagements for our students and our businesses, we're going to be better as Northwest Kansas.
Thank you. Any of you guys would like to add on to that?
I think she did a great job encapsulating really what we're trying to talk about. And I know you've got a question for me coming up that maybe I can expound on that too.
Sure thing. Next question, why do we believe this affiliation is necessary, and what is your driving efforts for it, Burks?
Yeah, we're again super excited about this. We're all three coming from a position of strength. And I think that's an important thing to point out too. Oftentimes you see, and probably in higher ed, they're called affiliations or mergers. This is an affiliation, not a merger. It's a partnership. But you see schools come together often when they're struggling, and that's not the case here. We're excited about the fact that we're all three strong. We're excited about the fact that we've already been in affiliation with Fort Hays State University. We have great programs and great history of working together. We've also partnered with Northwest Tech in the past too, and so for us to affiliate and to formalize that affiliation even further, to take it to another level, we're going to be able to make sure that we can deliver things to our students and to our communities, which again is the true north of this whole project, is to really better serve our students, better serve our communities by making sure that we've got a true commitment to one another there, and that for a student, they could get anything from a CDL or a CNA certification or licensure all the way up to potentially a doctorate degree through Fort Hays and everything in between. So again, being a place where everyone can get everything from one institution, and businesses, when they engage with us, maybe it's something that they're talking to us about and they need a 1 year or 2 year, but they also need something from the 4 year that we can't provide. We now have had those conversations and we can say, well, we're partners with Fort Hays State, and so maybe we can bring them into the conversation here as well and really help serve all of their needs. And so we're really excited about the opportunities that all of that brings, again, to our communities and to our students.
Thank you. It does sound really exciting. How will this affiliation impact students at each 3 institutions? And if we could begin with President Schears.
Yeah, I think there's the possibilities are endless. When we look at technical education students or students that choose to go the 2-year technical education route, a lot of times they're what I would call wires and pliers students. They're students that really like to be in a hands-on environment. And so, generally speaking, when you have a student that comes through one of the technical colleges, that's kind of how they're wired at that time. Right, there may be points in time in the future where they're looking at their career opportunities and they're saying, if they're working in a service level role in an automotive shop, for example, and they want to move from out of the shop into more of the management role, they're going to need some skill set to be able to do that. They're going to need a different toolbox, as it were, to be able to move into those kinds of roles. And so that presents us rather some opportunities to work with the university. So when we have graduates of our programs or students whose long-term goal maybe is looking towards those opportunities within technical education that exist, what are the pathways that we have that we can create and strengthen to be able to allow those students to continue to move on and develop. I really love practical examples, and so one that I've talked about before with regard to this affiliation is we have a young man that graduated from our carpentry program this last year. A gentleman that grew up in Scott City, so he's a Western Kansas kid, which we love to see. Came to school at Northwest Tech, saw an opportunity in Northwest Kansas to be able to set up shop. So when he was a freshman at the Tech College, he started his own LLC, began his business, got his handyman's license in town. But his long-term desire, his long-term goal is to build homes. He wants to do new construction for homes, which, as you may know, is a significant need in rural Kansas right now.
Yeah.
We need homes. And so for him to be able to take what he has learned within our program after having graduated, he's got about a year under his belt in practical experience in the community. For students like him to then have a pathway to be able to continue on into, for example, the construction management program at Fort Hays State, and through this affiliation look to see how we can build those pathways so that they're seamless for students who have that desire to continue on. That's really, I think, an important opportunity for students to be able to do. And so those are some pieces in more of a practical example of what I would look at that I would see some real possibilities for students, in that regard. So yeah, just creating those pathways, creating alignment between the institutions. Items we've talked about have been everything from how we transfer records between institutions from the 2-year colleges up to the university. How do we make that process smoother? How do we present an opportunity where we have an academic advising process and system that's integrated? How do we look at that when we have a student that walks in our doors for programs with that long-term goal, that long-term vision of moving to the university? How do we make sure that we advise the student appropriately so that they can make that process seamless? One more example that I'll throw in too is, we don't have a heavy equipment operator program. NCK Tech does. So we talk and we look at this a lot of times as 2-year college to university, but there's also, this presents us the opportunity to move throughout the system in different ways than we've done in the past. We don't have that program, but there may be an opportunity if we have a student that comes to us interested in that program. We say, we don't have that, but we have a partner institution that we're affiliated with that does. So we create that connection then with NCK Tech, and hopefully we see that happen across the system so that, again, we're connecting students with educational opportunities that help to keep them in Western Kansas in our rural communities where the job opportunities are plentiful.
Yeah, I think that's really great, with colleges mostly not necessarily competing against each other, but a little competing, advertising against each other, where in this case, we might not have this, but we know who does, and we can point you into that next direction instead of, maybe like running around the student being like, yeah, well, maybe we could have this. I appreciate that. I think that's really useful.
I think you can see how that, again, serves our students and our communities better in us all working together instead of, and I would never say that we've been working against each other, but we haven't been working together as intentionally as we expect to in this affiliation. Yeah. And I think too, as President Schears mentioned, wires and pliers students, hands-on learners, I think a lot of people learn best by doing. I want to qualify it by saying that's not meant to be any slight. Because he actually was a graduate of Flint Hills Technical College, and now he's the president of a technical college. And so certainly that wasn't his goal when he went into, was it HVAC?
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I thought. So, but see where it's taken him. And so again, a student starts out with a particular thing in mind that they think they want to do, but as their life evolves and things change, they may aspire to do something different. This gives them the opportunity just to hop right back in and take off. It also helps a student who maybe thought they were a four-year student that thought that was what they wanted to do. They get involved and they go, this isn't exactly what I want to do. I've seen what they're doing over at the tech college, and that's more of my thing. And so they can transfer in that way too. So just making that ability for students to be able to transfer in and out of our institutions as seamlessly as possible, that's one of the real benefits that we're hoping to realize through this partnership. And it won't happen right away, but it's something that will evolve as we learn each other and learn how to make that happen more in a more seamless way.
Just this morning in a meeting right before this, a member of our team was talking about an alum whose son came to Fort Hays and just really struggled, shy and everything. And so he ended up leaving Fort Hays and going to NCK Tech and getting a degree and then coming back to Fort Hays. And it was right what he needed to do. But what happened in his scenario that we're trying to remove was a lot of barriers of being considered a dropout, having to redo financial aid processes, having to pay another application fee. Those are the things that we want to get away for students so that, again, they can traverse and manage our institutions more seamlessly as part of the Fort Hays family. The other thing when I listen to Ben and Eric speak, my colleagues, President Schears, President Burks, is, we also have, as you know, this big culture of entrepreneurship. So when we have the Faulkner Challenge, where our students are competing in a weekend, what if we had tech college students who are interested in starting their own business come over and be part of these teams and win the prize money? What if they come back and they're able to go through our Small Business Development Center and incubate a business? We've got a lot of opportunities, I think, for all of our students to do that collectively, and that's really exciting.
Thank you. Thank you, all three presidents. This sounds something that is brand new and never tried before. So what makes you think that this affiliation will work as advertisements? And if we could start with President Schears.
Yeah, so as President Burks mentioned, a product of tech ed in the state of Kansas, so I breathe and bleed tech ed to the core. But I also, once I went on, studied history. So I'm a history guy, and so I want to kind of put this in the context of what technical education in the state of Kansas has done in the past. Because I think it's important to understand that kind of moving forward. This is not a new concept within the state of Kansas. It feels new because it's new to Western Kansas and it's new to North Central Kansas and Northwest Kansas. But the concept of institutions working together and partnering together has been around for a long time. It's taken different shapes and forms over the years. The technical education realm, if you go back to about the mid-1980s, there were about twice as many technical colleges or technical schools, as they were called at that time, around the state. And about 5 of those have since been absolved or merged completely into area community colleges around the state. And there's 2 other models out there that have built collaborations and partnerships directly with universities. One is at Washburn Tech, and so Washburn Tech and Washburn University are, I would say they're a little closer to a full merger, so that's kind of their structure. And then you have Wichita State and what was Wichita Area Technical College, which is now WSU Tech. They began that process through a couple legislative sessions in 2017, 2018, and went through, successfully piloted everything and got that affiliation stood up. And so the process itself, we've seen work on the east side of the state within urban settings, and I think what we're excited about is the possibilities of now seeing this work in a rural setting. And so although there are some similarities with what we see in other affiliations around the state, we're really looking to make this something unique and more specifically fit the various communities and stakeholders that each of us serve. So.
Thank you. And then my next question is, how will this affiliation impact faculty, staff at these 3 institutions? Will their voices and concerns be addressed as you move through this process? If we could start from President Mason.
Yeah, so we spent a lot of time together building a framework and a process. We're not the content experts. So in this framework we developed, we chose 3 academic areas: nursing, ag, and construction, because we share part of that, and there are big needs in our communities for those areas. And then we have some administrative functions identified as well. And so we're going to kind of experiment, learn some things. So everything in nursing will be designed collectively by our nursing faculty. They create it. We're just saying, this is the framework, this is our goals, these are the outcomes, but you know how to do this together collectively. And so we're not trying to work cooperatively together, we're trying to work very much as one body of nursing faculty and ag faculty in different ways, and how can we supplement one another. And so from the very beginning, as we start to incrementally prove concepts and learn from nursing that may go later into informatics and computer sciences, they've got best practices developed, and then they can even expand that further. So faculty and staff and student voices will definitely be part of it, because it has to be. We can't design this, but we can set the tone and the vision and help encourage and incentivize people to do the work that will accomplish our goals of doing better for our students and for our communities.
Thank you.
You know, I think I'm going to expand just a little bit. One of the
Yeah, of course.
examples that we've used in the past, and certainly we've talked about this, I've used this analogy locally. A lot of the work that the 3 of us have done at this point is like pouring a foundation on a house and building the exterior walls, right? We've got the studs up at this point, but we need a lot of input from across various stakeholders at 3 institutions, as well as within the communities, alumni, to be able to finish off the house, right? To do all the finish work, the interior work, in order to make this thing happen. So it certainly will take a lot of work, and it's going to take a lot of different voices, and it's going to take time. You know, I think that's the important thing that you've heard us kind of hint at a little bit and kind of stress is, and Dr. Mason says this all the time, the best way to eat an elephant's a piece at a time, and that's how we're going to have to tackle this. And I think taking this in a very intentional and process-oriented, as we move through this in a process-oriented way, it allows different opportunities throughout this process to be able to engage various different stakeholders. So.
And I think, you know, one of the things that we certainly want to stress through that is we're inviting all of your viewership, everyone listening, everyone that we talk to, engage in the process. I mean, we don't want to do this alone. We need them. And we know that the more voices and the more people that come to the table and help shape this, the better outcome that we're going to have. So that means students. We want to hear from students. We want to hear from faculty and staff. We want to hear from administration. We want to hear from our community and constituents, because we know as they bring their concerns and also their suggestions for how they think this could work best, we'll be able to take all of that together and really come out with something that's really going to serve us well to the future.
And we've already had some sample initiatives, not even in the pilots that we have designed in nursing, ag, and construction. But for example, I was talking to the informatics faculty, and they're excited about that at Fort Hays. So they're already reaching out to our colleagues at these 2 campuses saying, let's do a meet and greet. Let's start talking about what your needs are. What are your future? How do we do this together? So they're starting to think about this collectively before, even though they're not identified as a first pilot. And so there's other examples that I'm starting to hear around campus that's really exciting.
And the one aspect, and you could lump this into community, but it's a really core piece to what we're trying to do here too, is to get businesses to the table too, industry to come, because what we're trying to do is help support the industry in western and central Kansas in our service areas and beyond, in the state of Kansas and beyond. But we certainly want to help them. Again, we're seeing these demographic shifts. We know that this is important, and we need these jobs to be filled by folks that are coming to our institutions. That's probably the easiest way versus trying to recruit them from someplace else. If they're already here, they already like the way of life that we have here, let's find ways to connect those businesses and our students together with opportunities for learning, but also opportunities for employment after education.
Thank you. And you guys mentioned that you want students, you want faculty to come and engage and ask questions, and that kind of leads me to my next question is, how can they learn more about this, and what is the best way to ask questions about this initiative? If we could start with President Mason.
Well, there is a town hall today at 1 o'clock, so that's a great place. We continue to update our community through Cabinet. There's student representation through the student government on our cabinet. All of our agendas are posted beforehand. You can attend. It's an open meeting. All of our minutes are shared with all the faculty and staff as well. We have a website. So if you want to go in to the website, you can read all kinds of documents. You can keep up yourself. And there's a Ask a Question. I've certainly said to the Fort Hays faculty and staff and students, I'll come to any meeting. You can set up a meeting with me if you want to have just dialogue one-on-one. And so I know that I really respect and trust my colleagues, and that's really key to this initiative. And I know that they have the same spirit of transparency and openness to have further dialogue, because through those dialogues and those questions, you have new learning happening, right? The more you talk about something and explore it, and it leads to new ideas of how we might even alter something and get a new version. So we encourage the dialogue. It'll be helpful for us to move forward.
Thank you. I'm glad to know that there is these outputs for students to go and get those questions answered without feeling like their questions are going to avoid going to nothing. Yes, go ahead.
I just want to echo that, and I guess maybe I'll speak for both of us to say that. But I know that we just want to extend that to our campuses as well. That anyone that wants to invite us to come and speak with them, whether it be an individual, they can come to our office. We can come to them. We can go to their meetings. Students, we're happy to meet with student government. We have student senate, and would be happy to visit with them, or informally to visit with a group of students that just have a certain concern or whatever. I mean, we certainly want to be as transparent as we possibly can on this. We want to get as many voices involved as we can, again, because that's only going to make it stronger and a better output for both. So.
Yeah, agreed.
Thank you. And then next, getting into a little bit of the numbers of it all, what will this do to the tuition costs at NCK Tech and Northwest Tech? And if we could lead this with President Schears.
Yeah, so what we've talked about at this point in time, and I think this is an important piece of kind of understanding the nature and the structure of an affiliation. An affiliation, as we talked a little bit about the differences between that and mergers earlier, each of the two-year colleges will still maintain their separate accreditation, as well as separate funding streams. And so a lot of those decisions when it comes to tuition, those are going to be decisions that are made still at the local level in working with back and forth with the university. So, one of the questions that's kind of similar to this we get sometimes is, I had it at a community forum the other night in town was, well, when this affiliation is done, are we going to see our tuition jump up? And I said, that's really not the goal. The realities that we all face in the state of Kansas individually as institutions are that I think we all make a very conscious effort to keep our costs affordable. I mean, that certainly has been a cornerstone of Fort Hays State's reputation around the state and around the nation, for that matter. And I think that I would say that, not speaking for Eric, but I would say in our case, our job is to keep technical education affordable so that we don't have students going out into industry saddled with a lot of debt. We're nationally right now, they're getting close to about $40,000 as the average student loan debt. I can say for our institution, we're under $7,000. And so affordability is still something very significant to us. And so, we're going to continue to do what we can to keep those costs affordable so that, again, our students can graduate, can get a great job that pays well, and can go out and start a family, buy a house, buy a car, do all those important kinds of things without being saddled with student loan debt. So I would say that's probably less of a concern or should be less of a concern going forward with this. Now, at the same time, we never know what happens in Topeka, right? Those changes happen with funding, and we're always kind of on guard and watching what's going to happen on the east side of the state with regard to that. But again, our goal is to keep tuition as low as we can and not skyrocket that kind of stuff on students. We don't want to pass that burden and that responsibility back onto students.
The other thing that I would add is that I think will impact tuition, again, not immediately. I think this is a long play, right? This isn't something that we're going to see all the changes happen in year one and that's all you're going to see. You're going to see these pilot programs, you're going to see some administrative things starting to work together to try to make that seamless transition and ability to work for students to flow back and forth. But I think as we learn more about one another, as we realize, hey, we're doing that and you're doing that, and that we're going to recognize some efficiencies in how we purchase things and how we utilize different softwares and whatever. I mean, and I don't want to make any promises there because I don't know for sure what that's going to look like, but I can't imagine that as we look and get to understand each other, how we work behind the scenes a little bit more, that there won't be opportunities for us to be more efficient and to work together. So that's part of why we're forming this affiliation the way we are too, because there's some advantages to us being separate in keeping our funding streams and things like that, but there's also advantages to us partnering that give us an opportunity to talk to businesses as the three of us combined instead of having to sit at that negotiations table alone. And so I think we're going to see some benefits there that we will then be able to hopefully pass along to students in at least stabilizing tuition so that we wouldn't have to increase it as much. So I'm hopeful that that will be an outcome.
And then for Fort Hays State, I think important to say is that if you don't know, we have a budget committee that sets tuition. And on there are 2 representatives from student government, 2 from staff senate, 2 from faculty senate, and then our senior leadership team. And I always go to student government before we go to the Kansas Board of Regents and talk about where we are and why and what the tuition is going to be. So in terms of that shared governance process, that will continue, and it'll just be about Fort Hays State's budget. However, in addition to what President Burks just shared, I really do believe that there is an opportunity for us to grow collectively, that people are getting excited about this. And one of the things that we know from Fort Hays is with 19 consecutive years of growth, it gave us more elasticity and opportunity to keep tuition low. So the more students you serve, the more opportunity you have to keep tuition low. So I think hopefully, in addition to the efficiencies, that a growth strategy will also help us keep our tuition low. So we are all firmly grounded in the value propositions of our institutions for our students and for our communities, and that will always remain a cornerstone. That value proposition doesn't mean, just like inflation, that nothing, that tuition will never go up. But we are set on it.
Well, as a fellow college student, I'm very glad to hear that sentiment. My next question, more of just kind of the extra things that come around with this affiliation, is what is the name of each school going to look like, mascots, email addresses? I know it is a little early to be thinking about those things, but just any thoughts on that? And just any of you who would like to take that.
Well, we haven't led with me for a while, so I'll lead on this one. No, I think that the big thing there really is that this is where we need people to engage. I mean, these are things that are further down into the weeds. I'll use the analogy of the house. This is like finishing the drywall and choosing paint colors. So we're not there yet. We just have the frame stood up, and we're ready to add all of those pieces on. And so we're very excited about what that could lead to. As far as names, we have a formal name that will be in the legislation, but how we're going to brand that and how we're going to use that, how we're going to work with our mascots, all of those things that I know are high interest areas for students especially, but really for all of us. I think those are things that are yet to be determined, but we look forward to engaging as many people as we can as we come to a determination on what exactly that'll look like.
Some NCK Tech students are wondering if they will still have a gateway fee and if there will be if their student fees will change. President Burks, can you elaborate on this for them?
So, we again haven't really broached that subject, so I'm going to just speak a little bit off the cuff, but, to me, because if you think about us being 3 separate entities, even though we're affiliated and working together, that's a benefit that NCK Tech students get on the Hays campus that the Beloit students don't have, the Goodland students wouldn't have, and so it will still be something that would have to be paid for so that they can have access to that. Now, at the same time, we welcome student voices, as always, as we always have, to figure out how we can add value to that so that the cost that they're seeing, they're going, wow, it's a really great deal for all the things that I have access to. And so I always think there's an education piece to that, both on our part to learn more about what do students really want to get out of that, and also for students to really understand what's already available to them through the gateway fee. But as far as it affecting that, I mean, it will be the same. It would have to operate the same, at least the way I'm thinking about it right now. And then as it evolves, who knows what that might mean. But to think that that gateway fee would go away when we launch this, I think would not be something I would want to say at this point.
And historically, that became a program because the two presidents got together prior to both of us and wanted to create duplication of services. So instead of NCK building up tutoring and counseling and health services and other support services, I can't think of off my top, that there's a whole list of them. Since they're right here in Hayes and the Hayes campus, instead of investing in there, those students get to come here and utilize it. They also can live on our campus, and several have. They can take some
Student
of our,
health.
They can go to student health. They can join student organizations. They can't compete athletically. That's the thing because of some of the rules there. But other than that, they can have the full Fort Hays student experience to whatever level that they choose. But that saved them on tuition,
Right.
I assume, at North Central by sliding through our programs.
If we had to offer all of those same things on our campus, it would cost them much more than us being able to partner. And again, that's an efficiency that we hope we'll see as we continue to grow. But that was just one of those things that we noticed, well, actually our predecessors noticed and said, hey, there's a better way to do this. And so we just really need to help students understand what a benefit it really is. And mention not being able to compete in athletics, but their intramurals. I know that we've seen a growth in our students that are coming over and competing in intramurals. And so, again, just providing that full college experience, allowing them to meet people from the university and vice versa. I think that's very important too, as so much of college is about getting to build those relationships and networking with people who are going to be, out in the business community in the world after graduation. And so I really think that it serves our students well. Again, we want to learn though how we can add value to them. If they're concerned about that fee, we always want them to see that as a bargain, not as an extra cost.
Thank you. And then my last question for today is there just anything that you want to add or just anything you think it's important for students to know before we close this interview?
I do want to go back to, we don't have the formal name, but we have all agreed that we are going to be Fort Hays State University something. So if that's a question for people, we're going to be Fort Hays, but we'll have both a blended identity as well as a institutional specific identity. So I know our campus would have questions about that, so I just thought I'd throw it in.
No, that's great.
Yep.
I know that there have been questions about the process, about how, where are we at? What is this going to look like? How soon is this going to take place? All of those types of things. And so at this point, it has, and I'll add unanimously because I'm pretty proud that that's what has happened, but it has unanimously passed Northwest Tech's board, North Central Kansas Tech board, and also the Kansas Board of Regents. And so, and what passed was an MOU, which is basically a letter of intent that says we intend to affiliate, and has some things outlined there on what that's going to look like, and also legislation that does the same thing. And so now that legislation has been introduced. It's House Bill 2290, is that right? I believe that's
Yes.
right. 2290. And so it was introduced in the House Appropriations. And so it needs to work its way through the legislative process. Once it's done that and it's gone through both chambers, the House and the Senate, then it needs to be signed by the governor. And at that point, two things will happen. One, the Higher Learning Commission, which is the accrediting body for all three of our institutions, will need to sign on the governance change there. They'll have to authorize that, and then it will also go back to each of our boards to ratify what's called an affiliation agreement, which again is part of the more in-depth. It's more like the sheetrock and the plywood and all that we're strapping on and fastening to the framework that we've built. So it'll be more of those details that we're inviting people into that process. So there's a lot yet to be decided. There's a lot yet to happen. But if all of that successfully occurs, our hope would be that that should be done by next June. Through the legislative process. Then it will take who knows how long to go through HLC. But our hope is that we would be able to launch this in the fall of 2024. Now, we also have to have contingencies because it may not pass the first time through the legislative process. We're doing everything we can to make sure that happens, but it is possible. As President Schears mentioned with WSU Tech, it took 2 times through the process before it was able to go through. So we'll continue to work, though, and we are committed to this partnership. And even if it's not officially an affiliation that has a law supporting it, we're still going to work towards a lot of the same things that we've talked about with you so far, Kerrigan.
And the house won't be completely built still. So fall of 24 happens, and we'll probably have marketing, and so our identity, and certainly we have a lot more capacity in different areas to promote Fort Hays State University with our admissions programs. But that doesn't mean nursing's all figured out or academic advising's all figured out, because we will be kind of building it as we live it, and continue to experiment and then incrementally add on new problems and new pilots, not problems, and learn more and grow more. So even with fall 2024, I think you'll see, rebranding, hopefully some help with recruitment and admissions, but we'll still have a lot of work. As my colleague, President Burks said, there's a long game here. This is not a short game.
We'll continue the housing analogy one more time.
Yeah.
Just to carry that a little further.
I knew Ben would have to end with a story.
You got to have something. But the other thing to kind of consider too is that I think this is going to undergo several remodels over time, right? It's going to continue to be remodeled, tweaked. Again, looking for some of those efficiencies we talked about earlier. And honestly, right now we're so early in the process, and each of our campuses are still working through what this could look like. That over time there are going to be new ideas that continue to crop up, and we really hope that comes organically, right? We really want to see that come as kind of a groundswell within our institutions, within our students, to see what kinds of new things that maybe we haven't even talked about, or maybe when we have our committees stood up that are working on some of these projects, that whether it's ideas that come out of there or ideas that are brought to them to continue to advance this and build this. I think the reality for us is this, and this is a piece that we certainly try to hammer home. If you want a different outcome than what you have, and what we have right now is a declining population in Western Kansas. We have less business opportunities than we saw 50 years ago. And so we've got to change the conversation, and we've got to see some things change in Western Kansas if we want to see our communities continue to thrive. So if we want to see what we've always seen and what we've been watching happen, then we just need to stay alone as institutions and continue to do what we've been doing. If we want to begin to try to change the conversation in Western Kansas, to see our communities thrive, to see Western Kansas become more of a destination place for business and industry to set up shop, which therein they hire employees that come to those communities to be able to support those jobs. Somebody has to take the handle and open that door and allow that opportunity to happen. Kansas Leadership Center, I believe has a phrase that they say, if not you, then who? And if not now, then when? And that's how I see what we're doing. Is this, again, the silver bullet that's going to solve everything? No. But it's a step and a significant step in the right direction. And so those are the pieces that I think, I'm really excited about seeing what the potential possibilities are here.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, and I just think that and this may sound a little idealistic, but at the same time I think it's worth saying, we hope that we can model this as our three institutions that sometimes are seen as competitors, that, hey, we're joining forces because we understand that we're not each other's adversary enemy. It's the forces that are working against us that really are the biggest threat when we look at what's threatening our institutions. And so by combining, we're getting ready to weather that storm that we can see coming, but we're also getting ready to not just weather it, but to really grow through it, and to use it to be something that is a catalyst for positive growth instead of something that we just endure. And maybe, when I look at our communities, and there's so many great rivalries that happen on Friday nights on football fields and basketball courts and wrestling mats and whatever you want to say, those rivalries are healthy and competition is healthy. But at the same time, our communities can't look at each other as though they're enemies and adversaries. On Friday nights, that's fine. But the rest of the time, how can we grow together? Because we need this area of Kansas, not just your community, but the whole thing to grow. And to have a successful community here means you're going to have success over here also. And so we've got to look at that differently. And I hope that through this collaboration and this affiliation that we're doing, that communities and others in our area can see it as a model. So again, maybe a little idealistic, but at the same time, I think it's going to be necessary to change the mindset so that we can reverse some of the population trends and things that we're seeing that aren't positive for this area of our state.
And I'll just end with this. President Schears has said a lot through this process that we are each individually strong pieces of rope, very good rope. And when you take those three pieces and you entwine them together, the strength becomes even more powerful. And so I had to throw in an analogy too.
Yeah, that's good.
I
Or
love
a
it.
metaphor,
I love
whatever.
it. And she borrowed his. I like
there
it.
you go.
That's good.
Thank you for taking the time to talk to us.
Thank you. President Mason, President Burks, President Schears, thank you so much for joining me today. I think this shined a lot of light on a lot of questions that students were having, and I think this is going to answer a lot of questions that might be on their mind, but they might not necessarily know how to ask. So thank you for joining me today.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
And
you.
please keep the questions coming. That's how this is really be strong. So.
Thank you, guys. And thank you for joining us today. And we're just so happy to have these presidents on here and answering these questions to stay up to date on the latest information on these plans as this progresses and just builds into the great affiliation that it's going to be. Please visit each of these schools' websites. Thank you for joining me tonight. I'm Kerrigan Hutton, and this is Tiger Media Network.